The tank crews and the men from the 119th Infantry Regiment dismounted from the tanks. They came down, they broke open the locks on the rail car, and all these prisoners, 2,500 of them, began coming out of the rail cars. Hello, I'm Dr. George Cressman, and I'm the staff historian here at the Camp Landing Museum. And today I'd like to introduce you to one of our special museum displays that we title The Train at Magdeburg. This display tells the story of a miraculous rescue of Jewish prisoners from a German concentration camp near the end of World War II. What happened was that there were a set of prisoners being held at the Bergen-Belsen camp. They had been working at the camp and they had not been executed. But as troops were, both Soviet and Allied troops, were moving towards the various prison camps, the Germans recognized that the prisoners that were being held at Bergen-Belsen were not likely to be executed. They were likely to be rescued. And so 3 train loads of prisoners from Bergen-Belsen were planned to be moved out of Bergen-Belsen and sent to the Theresienstadt concentration camp for execution. 2 of those train loads, with approximately 2,500 prisoners each, had already departed Bergen-Belsen, and they were, the prisoners on those trains reached Theresienstadt and they were executed. A 3rd train load was loaded in early April of 1945 with, again, about 2,500 prisoners. And it was being sent to Theresienstadt as the previous 2 loads had gone. This train, however, got into routing problems. The first problem the train crew had was that there was significant destruction of tracks. And so they were delayed and along the route a number of times. The train was approaching the Elbe River, was planning to cross the Elbe River, but the bridge that they were planning to use had been destroyed. Local SS troops had them back up to a little town near Magdeburg, a little town called Farsleben. They were sitting there waiting for further directions. The train crew had been given several alternative scenarios. One was that they were to drive take the train out onto the destroyed bridge, get halfway across the Elbe River and dump the train into the Elbe River itself. The train crew, quite unsurprisingly, decided that was not a very good option because, of course, they were going to be killed also. So the train crew was waiting for an additional a set of directions advising them what they should do with the prisoners that they had. That train load on the 7th of April 1945 was then halted at this little town called Farsleben, just outside of Magdeburg. That takes us to a connection with the 30th Infantry Division, a division that trained here at Camp Landing. After capturing and liberating the city of Brunswick in Germany, the 30th Infantry Division continued to move to the east towards the Elbe River. They liberated a little city called Hillersleben, and at that Hillersleben, at the village of Hillersleben, there was a large Luftwaffe training base with a number of 2-story barracks there. The 30th Infantry Division took that Luftwaffe base and cleared all of the German soldiers, airmen, and so on out of the Luftwaffe base. The 30th Division then continued to push further to the east, headed towards Magdeburg, right on the Elbe River. As they proceeded east, they got reports that there was a German train stopped just to the north of Magdeburg in a little place called Farsleben. And so a small task force of the 743rd Tank Battalion, along with some men from the 119th Infantry Regiment, were sent to check out this train. As they moved forward, the task force entered the little town called Farsleben, and just outside of Farsleben, there's a hill, and that hill had a cut through it to allow the railroad to pass through. There had been no German resistance in Farsleben, but as the task force moved towards the location of the train, they came up over a small hill, looked down on the train. There were German soldiers, a German railroad crew, and German SS soldiers who immediately began running. They took off from the train. There were a number of civilians walking around. The reason for that was that some of the prisoners had been put in 40 and 8 boxcars. Others had been on standard passengers' cars, and those that were in the passenger cars were walking around. As the men from the 743rd Tank Battalion came up over the hill, one of the tank commanders had a camera and began recording the scene as he saw it. The tank crews and the men from the 119th Infantry Regiment dismounted from the tanks. They came down, they broke open the locks on the rail car, and all these prisoners, 2,500 of them, began coming out of the rail cars. The men of the 30th Infantry Division had just liberated the last trainload coming out of Bergen-Belsen, saving those Jews from being executed. The next question, of course, is what are you going to do with 2,500 prisoners who have just been freed? The 743rd had orders to move on. There was still a war to be fought. One of the liaison men from the 30th Infantry Division headquarters came up and was ordered to move the prisoners and make sure that they received medical care and food. The liaison officer got all of the men, all of the prisoners, all loaded on trucks, and they took them to the Luftwaffe base, which had just been liberated at Hillersleben. And at that base, they immediately began supplying food to the prisoners, making sure that they had adequate medical care. Lice were a huge problem, so delousing was undertaken. The amazing part of all of this is that there were 2,500 prisoners who were saved that day. There is a rough, a sort of a club, if you will, or an association of all of these, the remaining prisoners, those who are still alive, and the descendants of them. And they maintain contact with each other, and on a regular basis we hear about them here at the Camp Landing Museum. So I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to share with you an amazing story, an amazing rescue of a large number of prisoners. And I want to encourage you to come visit us, to see the mural, to look through the materials that we have here about this amazing rescue. The museum is open every day from noon to 4, and we'd welcome your visit. We'd like to tell you more of our stories. Second, there are more videos on our YouTube channel about Camp Landing's history. I encourage you to become a subscriber and look for new videos coming out every Tuesday. So for our museum staff and our wonderful group of volunteers, this is Dr. George Grossman signing off.